Hi. Hello.
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 Hello, and welcome to Architecting.
I'm kind of a wannabe architect who had the great good fortune to discover early on that I really stink at architectural design.
But there was something about owning a piece of land and knowing that that piece of land represented the fact that we were in total control, that we were going to develop something, we were going to build something of our own.
Hey, hello, and welcome to Architecting. This is the show where we look at the act of being an architect, the people and the stories behind the images and the buildings. In our very interconnected global world, this podcast, this show is going to be specifically local and focused. So we're just going to be focusing on Colorado architects and designers. My name is AdamWagoner. I'm a Denver-based architect. I'm married to an architect, Rebecca Wagoner. I have 2 architecture degrees from Kansas State and from Yale. I've worked at architecture firms in Wichita and Kansas City, in Rotterdam, in New Haven, in Mexico City, and now in Denver, where I'm an architect at Open Studio Architecture. And that brings us to our first live interview with Blake Mourer. So when I first moved to Denver, I really did a lot of research and dug into the Denver and Colorado architecture community, and Blake was one of the first ones that I reached out to. Just really admired his work and the firm that he had created. So he graciously was kind of writing back and forth, and we connected a little bit, but the timing didn't work out, and I ended up working for Will Henschel and 359 Design, who we'll get into later at some point. But after about 3 years, I left there and restarted my own firm, and reached out to Blake just to come and do some crits at the architecture school, and he invited me into the office for drinks and just to talk and hang out. And that silver-tongued devil ended up talking me out of my own firm and to join his firm. So I've been with him for over a year now. Blake is a graduate of the Fay Jones School of Architecture from the University of Arkansas. He had a long career with Denver, in Denver, the Gensler office of Denver, where he was the design director before founding Open Studio in 2011. Since then, the firm has grown to about 25 people and won multiple awards, most recently the AIA Colorado Young Firm of the Year in 2019. So I'm happy to introduce Blake as our first live guest. Thanks.
At the office today, all by myself for the 7th month in a row.
Nice. Well, yeah, thanks for joining. We had some a little bit of blank airtime before, so I was kind of giving an overview of what this podcast, this show will be. But really, the idea of just strengthening this Colorado community of architects, and just telling stories and kind of getting behind with the ideas and the experiences of people, especially like yourself, and wanted to have you on first. But
cool. Let's get after it.
Sounds good. So what's the 2-line bio of Blake Mourer? What would that sound like?
Man.
Who are you?
2 lines, huh? Stubborn. I don't know. Very tenacious and fighting for everything I've got. Seems nice. Every day and every year and every decade it's the same, but with a different fight. Be it the work or in private things. So
nice. I was trying to formulate this first question and to think about how people like get across the idea of how people see themselves. and then with the idea of how you get there. And so, when I was thinking that, thought you were gonna say, I'm a father, I'm the principal of Open Studio and blah blah blah. but I think it's interesting to see how you took that and the kind of the qualities of that. And so then my next question would be just how did you get there? So what was that path that's got to you to where you're at, and with those kind of qualities? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so backing up to answer the question accurately, I am a father and owner, founder, entrepreneur here, and definitely, I guess it's really best termed as not letting off the gas. There's always the ability to kind of start coasting or relaxing and trying to glide a little bit, but you really don't get that opportunity, not in this business, and I think not in life if you're going to live it well. So I think the characteristics are being a little bit stubborn, not accepting necessarily what we're taught, and trying to do things a little differently. And I think that's the entrepreneurial side that we all kind of have inside of us, and it's really who's tapping it a little heavier than others at different times. For me, I think I've learned a lot from just so many people, so many places, so many experiences. And I think you really aggregate those things, you pull them together, and it starts to define who you are. Some of those experiences define who you don't want to be. And you kind of pay attention to those just as much as the people that inspire you. And I think being able to sort through that and stay true to yourself is how you can get there. I think the other big thing is really knowing what is there for you. A lot of people, I think, don't really know where they want to go. And I think the struggles in the midterm of people's career is just sort of accepting what's around them and feel like, hey, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm doing my thing. But oftentimes that sort of becomes 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and they don't really look around and ask themselves these hard questions about how hard might it be to go do what you've always wanted to do, whatever that might be. It could just be working at another place or another city, or working in a different capacity within the industry. But a lot of people just avoid that, and it's tough, but I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd say not a lot, but I say most people, right? I mean, it's easy to kind of design your path in a way, right? So did you always have that vision of the path that's gotten you here, or has it been pretty windy?
No, definitely not. I think little moments, if you're paying attention, are what really bring you to wherever you are today. And those little pieces, those little synergistic moments where things just sort of really, really work, and you're paying attention, or things really aren't working at all and you're paying attention, whether it's for your own, whether it's your own compass for the moral compass, or whether it's just you're not feeling inspired, or whatever it might be. Any number of things can really, I think, be the trigger. And it's not necessarily about branching out and starting a firm or anything like that. I think it's really just about staying aware of what is your contribution to your community, and what is your contribution to your industry, whatever that might be. And is it what you want it to be? I don't know how people perceive me. I have very little idea of how anyone perceives me. I know what I do and what I've done to get where I am, but I really don't have a very good handle, I think, on how I'm perceived. I think of myself as really just a young, aspiring architect and runner and father and entrepreneur, and again, struggling and being stubborn simultaneously is often sort of the place you find yourself in. But you can't let it get you down. You got to find a way to make it motivate you, and I think that's what I do. Is I get really motivated when things get tricky, when things get really hard, and I think that's something that you have to really have to make it through.
So where did that come from? I mean,
being the youngest of the boys.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Yeah. So where'd you grow up?
Grew up in Arkansas.
And the family was like, so Four boys.
It's a fight. I keep using that term, but it's funny because you think about, just the dinner table when you're kind of hoping that you get enough, because it was, chaos with four boys, and I had two cousins that lived with us through high school. And so there were six teenage boys in the same house between, say, 8th grade and 12th grade, or 7th grade and 12th grade or something. And so it was total chaos. I mean, it was great. It was good fun, but it was pretty chaotic, and you sort of learn to speak your mind and have a voice and step in to the chaos a little bit in that kind of environment. So grew up in Arkansas. My dad was a brick mason and grew up on job sites working, construction, eventually became a structural welder to kind of make more money through college as I was putting myself through, and always, through in the architecture path, but a lot of construction that got me there.
What was that decision to go into architecture? Was it a pretty straight path, or is it pretty windy?
It was a 5th grade moment where, the classic teacher says, what does everybody want to do when they grow up? And I was like, I want to be an architect. And I really had no idea what that meant at the time. But I also knew that I didn't want to be in construction. I didn't want to be in the field. I'd done enough of that by then, even, believe it or not, that I was certain that that was not something I wanted to do. And so for me, that was one of those moments where you paid attention to the things that you didn't love and made sure that you tried to grow in the opposite direction. So for me, that was pretty pivotal. I respect construction tremendously. Obviously, I deal with it every day, but it's just something that I had done enough of by my college years. I knew it wasn't the way I wanted to live the next 40 years of my life.
Yeah, it's funny. That's the same way with me. My dad's a contractor, and I dug enough holes through high school. I decided I'd rather draw the holes to be dug than dig them.
Exactly.
So I think so we'll kind of go through the lineage a little bit. So you went to Arkansas for school, right?
Yep.
Was it kind of like, hey, this is the school that's close and that's where I go, or was it a concerted choice that
oh my God,
that you got there?
I was lucky to make it there, because it was a few hours away from where I grew up. But there were definitely, my horizon was just hoping to get to college, literally. Never mind having the foresight to actually look at options, or having a family that was supportive enough to actually know where to look or what to look for. I mean, we knew that University of Arkansas had an architecture program, and that checked the box, and that was literally as complicated as it got. So it was good, because it ended up being a decent school and had some really great professors and programs and experiences traveling abroad and that, but it was dumb luck, honestly. It was the only option. So, and that was financial as well as just resources in general.
Yeah, because it's a pretty specific kind of school, right? I mean, when you look at it in the landscape of architecture schools, it has a very defined identity, and it's interesting when you land in a place like that. Seemingly kind of by accident.
Yeah, very fortunate. I mean, it's a state school, the only architecture program offered in the state of Arkansas. And having grown up there, I just hadn't been to a lot of architecture offices or visited or seen any of that in my life. It had been more from the dirty side of architecture, which was the construction side, and very rural too. I mean, I just wasn't exposed to much at all. And so, going to that program felt big to me. It felt like a big deal. And so I wouldn't have known any different. And for years, I didn't know any different until I started traveling. I was on the accreditation team, the student accreditation team, when we were going back for our accreditation. I think it was my 3rd year. And so I traveled all over and visited other schools and saw other cities and did lots of things. It was really interesting to have that exposure so late in my educational career. I mean, I think that was the first time I stepped foot in an architecture office, was probably my 3rd year of school.
Yeah.
So I was very atypical, and maybe that's part of why I'm still quite atypical about my point of view. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think in some ways, at least in my experience, it's kind of typical. I did the same thing, like just went to the closest state school, and
Got it.
it's kind of hard when you're from a more rural place to kind of have that experience with firms or other schools but yeah, so when you were there, would you say it was a pretty defined kind of idea of architecture? Was there rifts and splits within the college that you kind of fell into, or?
Yeah, for sure. I would say I remained fairly naive about the whole thing for a number of years, and then pretty soon I started to see the political aspects form, and my own, personal opinions started to come to the forefront. I remember my third year, I was asked to be on the disciplinary council for being one of the students that would have to actually help review projects and students that were really on the cusp of being kicked out. And it was quite odd to be, having known so little and then be asked to take on this fairly significant role. But I really approached it just in a black and white issue. I would look at the work and look at the whatever was in front of me. And I went through a handful of those interviews. They were very quiet. They were very much behind the scenes, but there was this little thing that went on that was disciplinary action for students that were really not cutting it in the design program. And so that was interesting because I guess that's probably coincided with my sense of the politics and ultimately the seriousness to which people take this sport of architecture. It's kind of a big deal to a lot of people,
especially
and
in school.
I didn't know that. I really was truly naive to that. And so that was really interesting. And to this day, I think helped shape my sort of thoughts and in some ways caution about how to approach this industry and where some people are coming from is very different. And, I respect it, but it can be a challenge, a big challenge. Especially for those that don't have an alternative sport. It was just a joke. I was a bike racer in college, so if architecture was sucking for me for a particular week or month, I had my other thing to fall on, which was my cycling community, and I could kind of go there and throttle myself through races and training and feel pretty good. And then, likewise, if my cycling career was sucking wind, architecture was always there to hold me up and make me feel like I had something, and I always talked about that as like a dual sport. I have this sport and this sport. It was almost like dual major or two sporting endeavors because they were very similarly intense, but couldn't have been more different. Certainly the people too. The people were very, very different. But it gave me an outlet to not just be defined by one thing, but to be defined by multiple aspects of things I was passionate about. And I think that's always helped me.
Yeah, I feel like that's pretty unique. Like, it's hard for me even to say like what's a hobby, and it seems like a lot of architects that's an issue, right? Of what do I like to do outside, and to have that split.
You do know that building a tree house is still architecture, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. That's my only other hobby.
That was an inside joke there.
Yeah, I built a treehouse, and now actually you can kind of see up here. I'm building a loft inside, so there's going to be a summer treehouse and a winter treehouse up here.
I love it
for my son. So
of course there is.
That's the next process. But I think that's interesting that thing of identifying that there needs to be a world outside of architecture, but then after architecture, going in. You moved to LA and worked for Morphosis, right? That's like one of the kings of the sport of architecture, right?
Yeah,
especially at that time. When were you there, and what was the kind of culture at that time?
So it was, again, this is really kind of pulling up a lot of interesting things, but 1993, I think, was the year. My third year of architecture school, And I had met a woman or girl at the AIS National Convention who was at Savannah College of Art and Design. We started dating. Her name was Ingrid, and we dated, probably a year and a half. And she had some connections, and we just started talking and networking and that. And we were, had a relationship abroad or, remote. So we had met up in different cities and things like that. And at any rate, she convinced me to apply to an internship with Thom Mayne. And so I submitted my portfolio, and I got a call one day in the studio from them. And I thought someone was joking. They're like, hey, Blythe, Mayne is calling you from Morphosis. And I was like, okay. And I pick up the phone. They're like, hey, we got your portfolio. We'd like to have you come out for the summer. And it was just so surreal. I was really blown away. And so it was a summer thing. I went out, I think, maybe early. I kind of bailed on the last couple of weeks of school and got my exams done early, worked it out with all the professors, because by then it was all architecture program. There was really nothing out of the school. So everybody was super supportive. And I went in probably early May and actually came back late as well and started late. And so I had, it wasn't a long internship, but it was very impactful. I was the only U.S. resident that was actually an intern. Everybody else was from another country. So it was a really cool class of interns. And, that's how they do it. They have a class. There's, every summer there's just a big group of people that they're doing, large volumes of work. And it was
how many people was it? Like how many?
There were probably 12 interns. And then the core group was Kim Groves and John Enright. And of course, Tom and a couple others that were kind of core employees, maybe 4 real, full-time employees. And it was a really unique time. I mean, they were on Colorado Avenue in Santa Monica, and they just moved into the new office at the time. This was obviously decades ago now. But it was a very interesting time. I mean, our friends were all working, the people I met while I was in LA were all working in the same capacity, interning at all the different firms that we were all, really enamored by at the time. And so it was very special, really, really special. And also really pivotal in helping build the confidence that maybe, my own point of view had some value in this business. Because again, I came from such a place of not knowing if my opinion had any value, or I really did not have a clue what I was doing, to be honest. I'm not sure I still do, but at the end of the day, it was pretty interesting. Very, very, very cool. Very warm and welcoming, friendly, always. Very hardworking, many, many, many hours a week. But we socialized together. And I took the bike with me, and I raced and trained like I did. I slept very, very little and rode my bike or was at the studio every hour of the day, with the exception of a few hours of sleep every night. That was it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the famous story, right, of him starting that office and sleeping in his car and then having to go to grad school so that he could start at grad school. And I mean, exactly. That's the, it's such the architect's architect. I mean, and so so it was a invigorating experience. I mean, it wasn't, I mean, it was all encompassing, I assume, like you're saying, like little sleep, but like just,
the intensity level was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. And so I don't know that I knew that was going to be the case, but I certainly was up for the task, given, my work ethic and willingness to just not let up, and, the ability to not sleep that we all learn in studio transcended for me pretty much through the cycling and the architecture. It was just like, I want to be doing something. I want to be active. I want to do all these things. And the thing that's going to lose out is sleep.
Yeah.
That's just the way it works.
Yeah.
And for me, it was trying to balance those things and really try to stay a little bit foot in two worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. So you graduated, and then what did you move on to?
So graduated. I actually, in order to make enough money to move from Fayetteville, I continued through the summer. I believe it was '95, and worked full time as a welder to make enough money to load up the car with the few things that I owned. 3 bikes, I think, and and literally 3 bikes and an Eames Aluminum Group chair that I had traded for some pottery that I had thrown with some buddies at a pottery studio. So that's a whole nother story. But I had an aluminum group chair. That's the only piece of furniture I'd ever owned, and my bikes. And I moved to Colorado.
Why here?
Colorado was just a stop off. I was actually headed further west. I didn't really know where, but I had some friends here, and stopped off. And the cycling community is really warm and open and welcoming. And so I started riding bikes and met some people. And I was in Steamboat for that summer, I believe, for the better part of the summer and fall, living and working for a one-woman shop in Steamboat. And a good portion of the time I was living out of a tent and riding my bike and working for her.
Who was that?
I'd use the shower at the office. And it was crazy. And then I moved to Denver full time after that and realized that Colorado was where I wanted to be. So that was interesting. I actually slept in a teepee for about 2 weeks on top of Flagstaff Mountain in Boulder. Met some people and again was really not wanting to settle too soon and wanted to just explore and make sure this is a place I wanted to be. And so I got up every morning, rode my bike for 3 or 4 or 5 hours, and ate a bunch of food and explored the cities when I was done on the bike, and checked out Boulder and Fort Collins, and I was down in Taos and all over New Mexico as well. And so I was trying to keep an open mind, and then Denver just made a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. I really liked that Boulder was the hot spot, but Denver was kind of the up and comer, and you could see that back then in the early '90s. And I think I really liked that it was not yet the hot spot, and I wanted to be a part of it becoming that. I really was excited about how gritty it kind of was and how transformational it was seeming to become. And I sure had no idea where it would go, but that was a big part of it for me.
So what were the firms like at that time? Like, what was the kind of community? And it seems like it's changed a lot.
100% Bill Munchell spinoffs is what they were.
Who was that?
Bill Munchell was.
Bill Munchell. Huh.
Yeah, Bill Munchell was had the big firm in town, great design, well known, and so virtually every notable firm at the time was a spinoff of that firm. And so I ended up at Roth Shepard before I went to Gensler. And so I think I went to Gensler in '98 and then stayed through whenever we started this in 2011.
So who were those other
1998. 1998 through 2011. So
who were those other spinoffs? Who were the other firms? Roth Shepard and
oh man, I'm gonna have a hard time remembering now. But there were probably 10 different firms at the time that were usually 2 partners that had worked together, that had spun off and done their thing. And there were a lot of solo architects, but it seemed like everywhere I went, there was Park Hill Ivins. I can't recall if I think one of those guys may have worked there. There was, E.J. Mead and Arc 11. Those guys were up in Boulder. I don't think either of them were at Munchell's office. But these are the guys I was starting to hang out with, and the folks that worked for those firms were the folks I was working, hanging out with. And I liked Herb and Jeff, what they were doing. They were a small shop, probably 7 or 8 people at the time, and just went there and started working. It was my first real job, working in a firm in a full-time capacity like that. They were really good to me. They were great guys, and we had a good time, and there was a good crew there at the time. So it was a lot of fun. But quickly I learned that I didn't want to be in a small firm doing, restaurants for the rest of my life, or doing single family residences one-off, or, and it worked really well for them and they were really successful. But for me, it was more about trying to go to a place that I didn't know anything about. And a buddy of mine had suggested I check out Gensler because they really were great with the business of architecture. That was his comment to me. I'm like, oh, I've never heard of them, literally. Like, okay, I've never heard of these people. Of course, because I was always looking at all the little guys. I was not paying attention to the big firms. And it was not a place that was ever on my radar, but I met some great people there, was hired. And I even told one of the principals at the time, I'll probably work here a year or two and then I'll probably move on, because I'm just really in a mode of trying to explore. And I ended up there almost 14 years. So, shows how little I knew about myself and how little I knew about how much they had to teach me. So it was kind of a funny thing that just sort of happened. But eventually I wanted to get back to that place that I had initiated, which was really just trying to be more intimate with architecture, more intimate with staff, with culture, with building something that was a little different. And the larger firms just didn't appeal to me in that way. And nothing negative, it's just different, so.
Yeah, I think like 14 years, it just sounds, it's so long.
Right.
And you had kind of such a path up through that one office here, right? So what were the sort of changes that occurred, and changes in your role as well?
Yeah, I think that part of it was what I mentioned early on in this discussion, is that, you do get, you sort of forget to pay attention sometimes. And I'd say that kind of happened in the middle. And so I wasn't unhappy or uninspired, or, I was traveling and working in all kinds of cities all over the world. And it was very dynamic with really great, talented people and all those things. I think for me, it was more about, again, I keep using the word intimacy with it. I think I wanted a little bit more connection to the people, to the clients, to the projects. You get to a point at the larger firms where you sort of win the work and can't touch it because your billing rate's too high. You're tasked with just winning work rather than doing work. And I wanted to kind of get back into that balance where I could sort of win and do and impact the work and the culture in the studio in a way that was a little bit more utilizing my skills, my broader interests and broader skill set, from construction to design to marketing, those kinds of things. I just kind of have a haphazard skill set. It's really not the normal thing. And so I kind of like using all of those tools that I have. And a firm like ours allows me more latitude to do that. And the bigger firms, you just end up, as you go up the ranks, you get more and more narrow in terms of what you're going to do. And it's just the way it's structured, and they kind of have to do that.
Yeah.
I get it. But it wasn't for me.
That has to be such a delicate balance, right? The idea that you set up a good system to win the work, but then you start winning too much work, and then it pulls you away from things. And so have you found that balance?
Yeah, definitely not. I would say far more so than we've been in business now for over nine years as Open Studio, and I think that the thing that I love about where we are now is I can wake up every day and make a choice on how I'm going to engage with the studio, the business, the projects, the clients. Like, I can choose that every day, and I like to think that it's entrepreneurial enough, even at the studio level, where everybody here can help define their path. We talk a lot about, when we're hiring people, what is it you want to do in 10 years? What is it you're trying to accomplish long term? And we genuinely want to support that. I can't keep tabs on all of it. I can't possibly know what everybody's thinking at any given time. But I do think we're an organization that allows for people to kind of raise their hand and say, hey, I've got an idea, or hey, I'd like to explore this in my career, and we're pretty agile and willing to try to make those things happen if feasible. And I think that because I want that myself, I want to be able to move around in the business a little bit. It's more interesting, and it's certainly it's more suitable to my personality, and I think a lot of people's personality.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So let's see. So starting, let's talk about the founding of Open Studio. So what was that like? 14 years. That's got to be a hard discussion or process of jumping ship. A lot of beer. Yeah.
So Brad and I worked together for 12 of those years, or close to it. I think I was there about 13 and a half years, maybe a little longer. He was there for maybe 11, just shy of 12. So we had an overlap that was almost a dozen years. And we worked together a lot. We were there, oftentimes we'd find ourselves there by ourselves late night, one or two other people maybe. It's a pretty big firm, locally even. So there may be someone on the other side of the studio or something, but oftentimes it'd be he and I. And, the discussions would start, and we would have the topic of, exploring this option of starting a firm. But I think what's really, the more you grow in the business, the lower your confidence gets. Particularly when you stay at a firm for a long time. I think you know that firm really well and the way they do things, but at least for me, I felt like I didn't really fully appreciate the other aspects of the business, because a lot of it is done for you. The business of architecture that you are a part of at a larger firm is really just fee management and consultant management. You're not managing a business. You're not running a company, or at least very few of the employees at large companies like that are actually part of the business. And so I was always interested in that, oddly, but I also love design. So, the numbers I was never afraid of. And so starting the business was kind of a leap of absolute uncertainty. Had no idea if it was going to work or fail. And I truly, in my own mind, gave it a 50-50 shot at working, because I had no idea. So, I think part of it was just, getting to a point of interest that was high enough, and my fear of failure was low enough that it was okay. It happened to be 2011, which was the crappiest economy in history and all that, but that didn't seem to matter for some reason. I don't even remember really contemplating that. Again, probably really naive and really dumb, but that was the reality of it.
Yeah, that's funny.
So,
I mean, I always, you tell the story of starting it, and it's always mind blowing to me in a way where I don't know how true it is. Where you just say, "Yeah, we quit. We're gonna drink beer on our porch for a year, and then we ended up getting a project in 2 weeks." And I think to me, just that idea of like, I mean, that was a serious thing of like, hey, you know what? I have enough set aside for a year to really figure this out. And I mean,
that was the deal. It's in all seriousness. I think part of the reason we kept telling ourselves that is because we really didn't know what we were doing. We truly didn't know what we were doing. I think Brad would totally agree, but we knew what we didn't want. But building from scratch something like this is a lot of things you never ever consider. I mean, there's so little architecture in building a business. Like, it's just forms for the state and forms for the county. It's a bunch of really mind-numbing items that you end up doing. And our thought was, we should get our business ducks in a row and really then focus on what kind of a culture we want to build, what kind of a place do we want to try to attract people to come to, both clients and employees, and really try to build the narrative of what this place should be before we bother trying to convince anyone to come. But shortly after we started on that, we were literally about 2 weeks into doing nothing, and all we were doing is just hanging out, drinking coffee with people in the industry we knew, and I think there was a lot of intrigue that we weren't aware of at our leaving, and especially the fact that we left together. We were kind of naive to the fact that a lot of people found that interesting and wanted to learn more. And so we were asked to go to coffee and beers and happy hour, every day of the week, it seemed, with general contractors and developers and other clients and people. And, the funny thing is we never picked up the phone and called anyone and said, hey, we left, we started our firm, we're going to do this, here's what we are. We never once picked up the phone and did that. But the phone was ringing, and it was shocking, honestly. It was very shocking that was happening. And we picked up the phone, of course, and met with people and chatted and told the story. And I think it helped us craft something that we hadn't fully developed yet, which was what is our story, why, and what are we going to try to do. The why was less important. It was really more about what are you going to try to do. And our story was pretty simple. We want to continue to do what we were doing. We just want to do it on our terms. So the project types, we would love for them to be the same, but we just want to do it in a culture and a studio that's kind of more of ours. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we did. And shortly after we started, we were awarded headquarters for Trizetto, their world headquarters, and that was the first call we got. Pretty crazy. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear, I want to do a lot more of these interviews and see how normal is that story, right? Of you definitely put in the work from before with Gensler and the connections and everything and it's like, does that normally happen? Like the weirdness of just getting projects, I was off on my own for 9 months, and I had a bunch of weird projects just popping up, and but you never know if they're going to keep going. But so you got.
I still don't know.
Yeah.
One thing's for sure, you never get comfortable with that, or at least you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because it's a very fickle industry in the sense that to remain relevant, you got to be relevant, and that's not easy to do. And so I think, particularly in times like we are in now in 2020, where there's, a chaotic election cycle and a pandemic and holidays and all these things sort of converging, it's as much uncertainty as I've ever felt, I think, in my career. But I don't feel like anxious, like, oh my God, things are going to fail. I just feel like I don't know what's really happening right now. I feel like we're very fortunate to have great clients that trust us, and we have more work than most, I think, and we have a killer team, obviously, and all. But I think the uncertainty is very unsettling, because it's never been this kind of uncertainty for these reasons.
That's interesting. I think one of my biggest questions that I want to ask everyone that's really interesting to me is just what was the moment of your biggest failure or your lowest kind of moment within the profession? And I wonder how this ranks for a lot of people, but what what's one of those images, those projects that looks really good and the biggest that barely got through disaster. Or what does one of those pop in your mind?
Well, I would say it's more less of a glossy, image or rendering or something that has a bad story behind it. It's more of an experience that I had, and I'll leave names out of it, but a very well-known entertainment person in Las Vegas had a really strong connection with my former firm, with Gensler. And I was in a meeting with Arthur Gensler and I just remember walking out of that meeting saying to myself, why am I here? Why am I in the room with this person who I found to be very repulsive and very evil and very it was shocking to me to be exposed to someone like that. And again, you look at the projects, the vast amount of real estate and entertainment things that this person owns, and it's staggering wealth. I mean, it's staggering how much wealth is there. But you could see very clearly that it got there in a very ruthless way. And that was very apparent to me that that was not a world I wanted to be a part of. That's not the kind of clients I wanted to spend time with. And so it became apparent to me that when you're feeding something so large, you know, you oftentimes have to take all the work that comes.
Yeah.
And I get that. But I think it became really clear to me that I didn't want to be in a place where that had to be the case. And again, I don't fault anybody for needing the work or taking the work, but I think for me personally, it was an opportunity to say, is that how I want to spend my time?
Yeah.
And I ended up, fast forward, I was spending, Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year that year at the office every day. No gaps, no breaks, no nothing for that client. And so it became even more apparent to me that I'm spending time away from my family and things that I care about, my own health and wellness, for this person that really couldn't care less about me, because ultimately it was just for that client. And I found that to be very polarizing in the studio even.
Yeah.
People were resentful and frustrated, and I could start to see that. And I think that's the question you asked earlier about it moving up. You kind of start to see certain things, and it was a tough time for me to kind of go through that, because it was just kind of a more dark side. There was a guy that worked for this guy that was just took the anger and frustration to a whole nother level, and it was just really, really hard environment to work in. So I think that was probably one of the more pivotal things for me that helped stimulate my firmness on moving on leaving and starting my own company.
Because it has to be, when you have a firm, has to be a lot of leaps of faith to say no to a lot of people that, to take those stances and know when to do that. And
it's a huge thing. And I think that that's kept us sort of the size we are, roughly 20 people, because we have said no to a lot of things. We could easily have been much bigger over the years by just saying yes to everything that came through the door. But I think it would have easily gotten us closer to that place that I didn't want to be. And I knew that. I've been aware of that since day one. I mean, it stuck with me, and I don't think it's leaving anytime soon. I don't want to work with assholes.
Yeah.
I really don't. I love working with people that respect our team and respect our job, that what we bring to their projects, and our clients bring that, in varied degrees. Everybody approaches it a little different, but I think one thing is universal is our clients really respect us. And I think that I didn't always feel that in previous experiences, previous firms. And I want to make sure that you may make some poor choices here and there, but I want to make sure that at least it's something that we're paying attention to, that we're trying to really align with partners that can make it a little more fun, make it a little bit more inspiring, make it a little bit more enjoyable, because it's a grind. I mean, this business is hard.
Yeah.
It's never straightforward. It's never easy. It's never, what you expect. It's always something different. And so I think the best thing you can do is try to align yourself with people that you respect and that respect you. And it does make it just a little bit easier as you go through the tough spots.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's nice. I mean, I think on the counter of that, what was that? What was the moment that sticks in your mind the most, where like that mountaintop kind of moment where you step back a little bit and just like breathe, and it's like, man, look at this. Like, there's a one that stick out?
Yeah, I honestly, I very clearly, I think it's funny because I think it's the day that we closed on a total piece of crap building that we bought that ultimately became the studio we built. But in some ways, buying that crappy little one-story beige brick building was more meaningful than walking into the new building we built. That was really special. But there was something about owning a piece of land and knowing that piece of land represented the fact that we were in total control, that we were going to develop something, we were going to build something of our own, and it was symbolic, I think, of taking control, of being, entrepreneurs as architects, and not just being architects waiting for the phone to ring. We were like, we're taking control. We're going to buy this land. We're going to envision a new building here. And so while, walking in and being operational in this building, a year and a half ago was really, really a big day. I kind of feel like buying the dilapidated building with a chain link fence and, lots of drug needles in the backyard was somehow more important. And it just felt bigger to me,
That's interesting. I think that kind of takes me into like the last question I want to ask, and especially I think you're very interesting in the way that you go about running a firm, and in the way your entrepreneurial nature that I think it's unique within architects. I think we're not normally known as good businessmen, I'd say. But so I'd say, so the question is like, do you know where you're headed? What's next? And yeah, is that kind of freedom that your financial agency part of that,
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say, it's probably got two answers. One would be on a personal level. I don't think I know for sure right now. As a firm, I feel a lot more maybe confident. I feel like the firm has finally built enough of a momentum that it can continue, and it can actually start to take on branches and facets that it hasn't had in the past. Like, for example, I feel like we're sort of to a size and time in our career or in our life cycle as a company that, new areas of work that we've never done are coming into play. Some that we've dabbled in are becoming a lot easier and maybe more common and frequent. So I think that the firm will continue to grow, but not necessarily in size, but in type of work. And so I like that a lot. I think the diversity of work is both healthy for helping through the downturns like we're in now, but I think it also just brings a lot of interest and intrigue to the staff. So having more interesting projects for our talented group to work on is, keeps them more engaged and frankly is staying true to the promise that, we can offer something different. And so I think that's important to me. Personally, I don't really know what, I love the idea of being in real estate. I'm a big fan of participating in real estate financially and owning things and developing things. I love that. It's been something that I've always been interested in. I've always, bought and improved homes and sold them for a profit and done that many, many, many times at this point. And it's sort of, I like the more grown-up version of the commercial side of things, which is pretty cool. It has its challenges for sure, and it's a whole other realm, but it's been interesting. It's been fun. It's been very, very challenging. But I think that path in real estate longer term is something that'll stay very relevant for me. How I participate in that is yet to be determined. I think what my role might be, both in the firm in 10 years versus 5 years versus what I might be doing within real estate and kind of trying to mash the two together. I'm really not sure, but I feel like it's going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on here as the first guest, and I appreciate you as a boss and bringing me into the studio and letting me do this
stuff. You bring a ton of good energy. It's awesome having you there. This has been fun.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very cool. Well, thanks for hosting me. It's been fun to tell the story. Some things I haven't thought about in a long, long time.
Good. I enjoyed hearing it. I'd always have to, with talking with you, I'd have to be like, well, in my mind, like, don't go into that too much. I want to save that for the podcast. Like, don't wait. I don't want to know too. I don't want to know too much. But I think that's great. So, hey, thanks.
I love it.
And now,
awesome.
Now get back to work.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
See ya. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
You can visit architecting.com, that's architect-ing.com, to see images from this week's guest.
And please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Have a great week and keep connecting.